Where's she taking you to?
New York. I don't want to go. I shall hate it. I shall be miserable.
I'll dress in here. I shan't be long. Which would you prefer? New York or Mandalay?
Oh, please don't joke about it. Mrs. Van Hopper's waiting, and I'd better say goodbye now.
I repeat what I said. Either you go to America with Mrs. Van Hopper, or you come home to Mandalay with me.
You mean you want a secretary or something?
I'm asking you to marry me, you little fool. Come in. Is that my food? I'm famished. I didn't have any breakfast. Suggestion didn't seem to go at all well. Sorry.
Oh, but you don't understand. It's that well, I'm not the sort of person men marry.
What on earth do you mean?
I don't belong in your sort of world, for one thing.
Well, what is my sort of world?
Oh, well, Mandolin, you know what I mean.
Well, I'm the best judge of whether you belong there or not. Of course, if you don't love me, that's a different thing. Fine blow to my conceit, that's all.
Oh, I do love you. I love you most dreadfully. I've been crying all morning because I thought I'd never see you again.
Bless you for that. I'll remind you of this one day. You won't believe me. It's a pity you have to grow up. Well, now that's settled, you may pour me out some coffee. 2 lumps of sugar and some milk, please. Same with my tea, don't forget. Who's going to break the news to Mrs. Van Hopper? Shall you or shall I?
Oh, you tell it. She'll be so angry.
What's the number of her room?
Oh, she's not there. She's downstairs in the car.
Hello? Give me the date, please. Hello? You'll find Mrs. Van Hopper waiting outside in her car. Would you ask her with my compliments if she'd very kindly come up and see me in my room? Yes, in my room.
Mr. De Winter says, please, for you to come up to his room.
Mr. De Winter? Why, certainly.
This isn't at all your idea of a proposal, is it? It should be in a conservatory. You in a white frock with a red rose in your hand, and a violin playing in the distance, and I should be making violent love to you behind a palm tree. Poor darling. Never mind.
Oh, I don't mind.
Don't worry, don't worry. You won't have to say a word.
I'm so glad you called me, Mr. De Winter. I was making a hasty departure. It was so rude of me not to let you know. But a cable came this morning announcing that my daughter is engaged to be married.
That's rather a coincidence, Mrs. Van Hopper. I asked you up here in order to tell you of my engagement.
You don't mean it? Oh, how perfectly wonderful. How romantic. Who is the lucky lady?
I apologize for depriving you of your companion in this abrupt way. I do hope it won't inconvenience you too greatly.
When did all this happen?
Just now, Mrs. Van Hopper. Just a few minutes ago.
I simply can't believe it. And I suppose I ought to scold you for not having breathed a word of all of this to me. What am I thinking of? I shall give you both my congratulations and my blessings. I'm very happy for you both. When and where is the wedding to be?
Here, as soon as possible.
A whirlwind romance. Splendid. I could easily postpone my sailing for a week. This poor child has no mother, so I shall take responsibility for all the arrangements. Trousseau, reception, and everything, and I'll give the bride away. But our luggage. Go down and tell the porter to take everything out of the car.
Just a minute. We're most grateful, Mrs. Van Hopper, but I think we'd both prefer to have it all as quiet as possible. And I couldn't possibly allow you to change your sailing plans.
Oh, but...
No. Dear, I'll go down and see that your luggage is brought back.
Thank you, Max.
So this is what's been happening during my illness. Tennis lessons, my foot. I suppose I have to hand it to you for a fast worker. How did you manage it? Still waters certainly run deep. Tell me, have you been doing anything you shouldn't?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, well, never mind. I always did say that Englishmen have strange tastes. But you certainly have your work cut out as mistress of Mandalay. To be perfectly frank with you, my dear, I can't see you doing it. You haven't the experience. You haven't the faintest idea of what it means to be a great lady. Of course, you know why he's marrying you, don't you? You haven't flattered yourself that he's in love with you. Fact is, that empty house got on his nerves to such an extent, he nearly went off his head. He just couldn't go on living alone.
You better leave, Mrs. Van Hopper. You'll miss your train.
Mrs. De Winter. Goodbye, my dear, and good luck.
Merci.
Monsieur, vous avez oublié votre carnet de mariage.
Oh,
What'd he say?
he says I've forgotten the proof that we're married.
Oh, good heavens.
Ah, somebody else had the same idea.
Isn't she sweet?
Yes. You'd have liked a bridal veil, wouldn't you? Or at least... Madame, combien ça fait? Tu le remercie. Yes.
Oh, Max, how lovely. Oh, how perfectly lovely. Oh, perfectly lovely.
Welcome home, Mr. De Winter.
Thank you, Smith. Cold, darling?
Yes, just a little bit.
There's no need to be frightened, you know. Just be yourself and they'll all adore you. You don't have to worry about the house at all. Mrs. Danvers is the housekeeper. Just leave it to her. Hello. Starting to rain. Better hurry up. Here, have this. Put it over your head.
Thank you.
That's it. That's Manderley. Here we are, Frith. Everybody well?
Yes, thank you, sir. We're glad to see you home, sir.
This is Mrs. De Winter, Frith.
How do you do?
I didn't expect the whole staff to be in attendance.
Miss Danvers' orders, sir.
Oh, sorry about this. Won't take long. This is Mrs. Danvers.
How do you do?
How do you do? I have everything in readiness for you.
That's very good of you. I didn't expect anything.
I think we'd like some tea, Frith.
Ready in the library, sir.
Come along, darling.
Oh, Maxim, come in. Oh, good evening, Mrs. Danvers.
Good evening, madam. I hope Alice was satisfactory, madam.
Oh, yes, thank you, perfectly.
She's the parlor maid. She'll have to look after you until your own maid arrives.
Oh, but I haven't a maid. I'm sure Alice will do very nicely.
I'm afraid that would not do for very long, madam. It's usual for ladies in your position to have a personal maid. I hope you approve the new decoration of these rooms, madam.
Oh, I didn't know it'd been changed. I hope you haven't been to too much trouble.
I only followed out Mr. De Winter's instructions.
Oh, well, what did it look like before?
It had an old paper and different hangings. It was never used much, except for occasional visitors.
Oh, then it wasn't Mr. De Winter's room originally.
No, madam. He's never used the east wing before. Of course, there's no view of the sea from here. The only good view of the sea is from the west wing.
The room's very charming, and I'm sure I'll be comfortable.
If there's anything you want done, madam, you have only to tell me.
I suppose you've been at Manderley for many years, longer than anyone else.
Not so long as Frith. He was here when the old gentleman was living, when Mr. De Winter was a boy.
Oh, I see, and you didn't come till after that.
I came here when the first Mrs. De Winter was a bride.
Mrs. Danvers, I do hope we'll be friends. You must be patient with me. This sort of life is new to me, and I do want to make a success of it and make Mr. De Winter happy, so I know I can leave all the household arrangements to you.
Very well. I hope I shall do everything to your satisfaction, madam. I've managed the house since Mrs. De Winter's death, and Mr. De Winter has never complained.
I think I'll go downstairs now.
That room in the west wing I was telling you about is there through that door. It's not used now. It's the most beautiful room in the house. The only one that looks down across the lawns to the sea. It was Mrs. De Winter's room.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You're Mrs. De Winter, aren't you?
Yes.
My name's Crawley. I manage the estate for Maxim. Awfully glad to meet you. There's a fearful lot of stuff piled up while Maxim was away.
Yes, I'm sure there must have been. I do wish I could help with some of it.
Oh, no. Frank never allows anybody to help him. He's like an old mother hen with his bills and rents and taxes. Come on, Frank, we must go with these estimates.
I'll get my papers.
You'll find quantities of breakfast over there, but you must eat it all or cook will be mortally offended.
Well, I'll do my best, Maxim.
I have to go over the place with Frank just to make sure that he hasn't lost any of it. You'll be all right, won't you? Getting acquainted with your new home. Have a look at the Times. There's a thrilling article on what's the matter with English cricket. Oh, yes. My sister Beatrice and her husband, Giles Lacey, have invited themselves over for lunch.
Today?
Yes. I suppose the old girl can't wait to look you over. You'll find her very direct. If she doesn't like you, she'll probably tell you so to your face. Don't worry, darling. I'll be back in time to protect you from her. Goodbye, darling.
Goodbye, Maxim.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. morning, Frith.
Isn't there anything I could get for you, madam?
Oh, no, thank you, Frith. I'm really not very hungry. Thank you.
The paper, madam.
Oh, yes, thank you, Frith.
Madam.
I slipped. Oh, thank you, Frith. It's big, isn't it?
Yes, madam. Mandalay is a big place. This was the banquet hall in the old days. It is still used on great occasions, such as a big dinner or a ball. And the public is admitted here, you know, once a week.
That's nice.
I beg pardon, madam. I'm afraid the fire is not usually lit in the library until the afternoon, but you'll find one in the morning room. Of course, if you wish this fire lit now, madam.
Oh, no, Frith, I wouldn't dream.
Mrs. De Winter, I mean the late Mrs. De Winter always did her correspondence and telephoning in the morning room after breakfast.
Thank you, Frith. Mrs. De Winter? Oh, I'm afraid you've made a mistake. Mrs. De Winter's been dead for over a year. Oh, I mean... oh.
That was the house telephone, madam. Probably the head gardener wishing instructions.
Did you want to see me, Mrs. Danvers?
Mr. De Winter informed me that his sister, Mrs. Lacey, and Major Lacey are expected for luncheon. I'd like to know if you approve of the menu.
Oh, well, I'm sure it's very suitable, very nice indeed.
You'll notice, madam, that I've left a blank space for the sauce. Mrs. De Winter was most particular about sauces.
Let's have whatever you think that Mrs. De Winter would have ordered.
Thank you, madam. When you've finished your letters, Robert will take them to the post.
My letters? Oh, yes, of course. Thank you, Mrs. Danvers.
How are you, Frith?
Good morning, Mrs. Lacey.
Where's Mr. De Winter?
I believe he went down to the farm with Mr. Crawley.
How tiresome of him not to be here when we arrive, and how typical. I must say old Danvers keeps the house looking lovely. She certainly learnt that trick of arranging flowers from Rebecca.
I wonder how she likes it now, being ordered about by an ex-chorus girl.
Now, where on earth did you get the idea she's an ex-chorus girl?
He picked her up in the south of France, didn't he?
What if he did?
Well, I mean to say, there you are.
How do you do? I'm Maxim's wife.
How do you do? Well, I must say you're quite different from what I expected.
No, but Cecilia, she's exactly what I told you she'd be. Well, how do you like Mandalay?
Very beautiful, isn't it?
And how do you get along with Mrs. Danvers?
Well, I've never met anyone quite like her before.
You mean she scares you?